Hi friends, welcome back. It's already April and I wanted to catch you up with everything I watched, TV shows and movies, and also a few games actually, in March. Before we get started, I want to do a huge thanks to Adam and Jake who secured my old Instagram after I got hacked. I was hacked early February and I didn't get my account back until last week, so thank you so much. And to celebrate, I'm gonna do a giveaway on my Instagram. I have a bunch of goodies that I've been saving actually for a little bit too long. You can tell because one is the original merch mask from the Pet Sematary remake, bunch of like horror goodies, and this here is the Terrifier 2 original script that's been signed by the director. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. If you want to get in on this giveaway, just go over, make sure you're following me because I will check, and then also read the caption and leave a comment. That's open worldwide. I'm not gonna do it from Australia and then not open it worldwide. I'm not like that. But let's get into everything I watched this month, and let's start with movies. Okay, the very first thing I watched at the start of the month was Love Lies Bleeding. This ended up being one of my favorite horror movies I've seen thus far this year. It's kind of thriller horror cusp, but it's by the same director as Saint Maud, and it has a few elements that really signify her stylization, Rose Glass. I really adored this movie. I have a whole review on it if you do want to go watch it, but it has Kristen Stewart, and it's about a gym manager who falls in love with a bodybuilder who is passing through town. It's a violent crime, bloody love story, and I would highly recommend it. After this, I watched American Fiction, which I absolutely loved. This was one of the films nominated for an Oscar, and so I wanted to check it out, and unfortunately didn't come out in cinemas here, but I was able to watch it on Amazon. This is a very interesting drama. It's called a black comedy, and it definitely has that aspect. I thought it was really clever. I think you have to watch it for yourself to understand what it's about fully, because I don't want to give away too much, but it's about a writer who is struggling getting noticed. He is kind of deemed that his work isn't black enough for a black writer, and then he takes that and really turns it on its head. But through it all, there's kind of this really interesting love story. The film is kind of meta. There's two very experimental, not crafted stories, but more so written stories that I watched this month, and this was one, and I really found this to be a fantastic piece of work, and I highly recommend it if you like dramas that are very thought-provoking. Then I watched Imaginary. I can't believe that was at the start of this month. God, that feels like forever ago. Imaginary, I have a whole review on. We all know it was a rant and it was a rave, and I did not love it. And a lot of you felt the same. Then I finally watched They Called Him Mostly Harmless. This is a true crime documentary that I talked about coming to VOD last month, the month before now, February, and I finally got around to watching it. So it's about a hiker that they find in the woods and they can't figure out their identity, and they have to enlist the help of other people in the area, and then it gets into a whole internet sleuth kind of thing. They really zero in on an interesting aspect of sleuthing and people really investing their heart and soul into these cases, but I don't feel like it was fully realized. I don't know, it was okay. It was interesting for what it was because I didn't know the story, but I would have liked to hear more either side about him or about the sleuthing, not so much in the middle. I didn't even realize I did a review on this one. Imagine romanticizing this case. Everyone needs to go touch some grass. In fact, why not go on a hike? After that, I watched, oh my gosh, guys, I watched this movie called Amelia's Children. This is a new horror film. It's a Portuguese horror film, I believe, and it is freaking bizarre. I think that the script was really interesting. I feel like they kind of fumbled putting it together production-wise because it's a very cool, disturbing, shocking story, and I just don't feel like they gave it as much detail as it should have. The film follows an adopted man who finds out his family is in Portugal and goes there to find them, and when he enters their abode, just strange things start happening, and he realizes that these people are not normal, and he is left to pick up the pieces and realize the dark history of his family. It sounds very stereotypical, but I promise there's a freaky twist. There's a freaky one that made me really appreciate watching it, but I just felt like there was so much more sinister action that could have been hammed up. They gave too much away too quickly. basically. So very interesting film though. I watched Wicked Little Letters. This is a drama comedy. I think it's based off a true story in 1920s England, where there are these bizarre letters that are getting sent around this small town, and they are full of these curse words, cussing people out, making these scandalous accusations, and just swearing at people, calling them names. This has Olivia Colman and Jessie Buckley, and it's really fun seeing them two as leads going head to head. Cute story, pretty straightforward, pretty silly, and a lot of fun to see in the cinema. I went to a kind of like a matinee premiere for this, and there was a lot of older people in the cinema just chuckling away, which I absolutely adored. So it was very lighthearted for the subject matter, believe it or not. So it was an enjoyable session for sure. After this, I did a rewatch of November. I do this with my patrons. We do hangouts every single month, and they pick the movies, and Henry picked November. This is a film that I love. I watched this years ago when I was doing 31 Days of Horror, a long time ago now. And this is a beautiful Estonian folklore horror movie that is so detailed and cinematically beautiful, but it doesn't give all of the information to all of the different aspects of the mythological creatures. So it allows you to make interpretations yourself, which means it's very rewatchable, and it's just a great film to analyze, and a weird love story towards the end, but it's a very crass and raw style of filmmaking that I really appreciated. Especially if you like folklore, fairy tale, grim kind of stories, this one you should not go past. Then I watched Spaceman, and I haven't heard anyone talk about Spaceman, which is this bizarre Adam Sandler film that I know it had a little hype when it was about to be released, but then I feel like it just got dropped on Netflix. This is about him in space, you know, lonely astronaut, spooky astronaut, lonely astronaut out there, and his kind of struggle mentally is basically the story. His relationship is in turmoil with his partner who is back on Earth, and it's very much a solo movie that really relies on his performance. I like Adam Sandler. This is very different for Adam Sandler, of course, but we've seen roles like this come up recently and in the past, but like, you know, with Uncut Gems and things like that. I didn't mind this film. I thought it was very wants to be thought-provoking, wants to be deep, and I feel like a lot of what is said in this film has been said so many other times, but it still kind of worked for me, so I gave it a 6 out of 10. I rewatched Knock at the Cabin. I did this for Does This Offend You, which is a live stream I do every single month, either on my channel or my friend Vicky, Nightmare Maven's channel. I am a Knock at the Cabin apologist. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems, and I think that you guys have very valid criticisms of this film that was adapted from the book. I have a video about the breakdown of every hidden meaning and message in the book and in the movie. It came out last year. I can't believe I'm saying last year. It feels like it came out 3 years ago, but it is about a family who go to a cabin, and it's their, you know, getaway vacation, and they get a knock on the door from 4 strangers who demand they make a choice. It's got Dave Bautista in it, who I really like, but it's just a very interesting predicament. Let's say that. It's more of a slow kind of conversational movie, but the symbolic nature of it is wild from the very first moment. It's one of those films that tell you everything that's going to happen in a different way in every scene, and I don't know, I like it. I'm a Knock at the Cabin apologist. I'm an M. Night apologist. After this, I watched You'll Never Find Me. I had such a cool viewing because I went and saw this at the Outdoor Cinema here. It is an Australian horror movie that's just hit Shudder. So I had a very immersive experience watching it at night, wind blowing, things knocking around. The movie is a slow burn, very, very slow, probably to its fault, about a woman who mysteriously shows up during a storm at a man's caravan. I do have a full review on that, but it was slow, so I'm warning you. I then watched The Rapture, and this is the other film that was for Does This Offend You. Not a fan of this movie. This is a very strange movie from the 90s. I will say, if you're looking for disturbing, this is it. This is the disturbing movie that we have been missing for sure. It's about a woman that overnight decides that she has these religious beliefs and kind of becomes part of this strange cult. It's really hard to explain, but basically the dire lengths that she goes to prove her faith It's scary, it's terrifying, it's violent, and it's just a strange way that they've told the story about her falling into this. So I wouldn't recommend it to you guys, but if you like really disturbing things and you like seeking out very kooky and strange films, yeah, I would. I would, in fact, but I didn't love it. I watched Frogman. I've been dying to talk about this one. This is a new found footage film. I talked about it with my What's Coming to VOD that month. It is about a bunch of friends, 3 friends, who decide to go and make this movie about this legend Frogman. It's really at the core of what found footage used to be, and they even discuss about using old handy cam. I think it's really fun. If you love found footage and are very nostalgic to what the subgenre used to be, this film is definitely worth watching because it has that feel that is really hard to replicate now. And I love the aspect of a frogman, and it has some really cool surprises. It's pretty silly found footage, but I don't know. I really enjoyed the whole process and getting sucked into the story, even though there's glitches and silly things. I do really love a cryptoid, so this one was for me, and I love frogs. Would highly recommend if you're a found footage fan, especially of old found footage. I watched stop motion. I was really excited to finally check this one out. They got a limited release across some countries and we didn't get it, so I was excited to finally see what it was about. Stop motion follows a stop motion animator and her mum who have a very strange relationship, and how she feels almost controlled like a puppet, and then her spiral basically from there. It is a very dark story. I heard some people calling it a slow burn. I don't think so at all. I think it's pretty fast, and it has these intercut scenes of actual stop motion animation. So when I saw the cover, because I didn't look at the trailer before watching this, I thought it was all going to be stop motion, kind of like Mad God, but it blends that into realism, obviously. So it's a live action film, but it's got to do with her profession, why stop motion is actually tied into it, which I think is pretty smart. I really like the concept and idea. It is quite gruesome, not as gruesome as people were saying it was, but it is pretty gruesome, and I do think it's worth a watch for sure. Next, I had Ghostbusters Afterlife. I love this new venture for Ghostbusters. A lot of you keep calling this a sequel because obviously it blends in the old Ghostbusters. I still call it a reboot because I think it's rebooting the franchise, because as you can see, there's none of the original Ghostbusters are on this poster because it's about this new core family. So I feel like they revived the cast. I guess it would be a requel if anything, but I just call it a reboot because I just feel like it's about these central characters. I wanted to rewatch this one before watching the new one, and it's just so good. I'm such a big fan of the original Ghostbusters. I used to watch it every single night before I went to sleep when I was 16, and this, I feel like, captures it in such a fun way. All the music is mirrored. All of the scenes are mirrored. It's so smart in the way it brings the new characters in with updated jokes and sense of humor, but then also has a blend of the old homages. I feel like it gives a lot of fan service, but for this, I was really okay with that. I just think it's a really well-crafted movie that they were able to have such a blend of the old and the new, and it worked so well that you still cared about every new character. Usually when that happens, even when it happened in Scream, it took me a while to care about the new characters, and I instantly loved these ones. From here, I picked a random movie. I believe this one was on Netflix. Outback. This is just one of those horror movies I always see the poster for, but I've never seen the film or really heard anything about it. And this one is about a young couple that are in kind of a little bit of a tiff, and they go to Australia. They're on their way to Australia, and they decide on a whim to go into the outback. It's like every choice you should make in a foreign country and then doing the complete opposite. It's not really like they're obnoxious or anything like that. They're just really naive. And they go out into the outback and they find themselves in dire situations, basically. It's a very slow film. You're watching them struggle to survive for most of it. And when I say struggle, like walking around the outback with no shoes on and dehydrated. That's half the film. I think that there was also some continuity issues. You can see the snake on here. I won't say too much, but it's got to do with the snake. I don't know. There just wasn't really much to it, and it felt like a very kind of lazy story. Very straightforward, almost like a short story that's stretched out for 90 minutes. Then I watched Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I did a review for this. Obviously following off Afterlife. This one is set back in New York, where this new family are now living, and they have taken over the old Ghostbusters headquarters. daughters. There really wasn't much Frozen Empire in this film, I have to say. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was good as Afterlife, but I still very much enjoyed it. And I just really love what they're doing with these new characters. I find it interesting. It's like a fun family adventure that's kind of a little bit spooky. And this one also brought back some more homages to the original, which I liked. I was very surprised they called it Frozen Empire because it's not frozen for much of the film. I will say a little bit of it let me down because they did so good in the original and most of this film, keeping that old look to all of the ghosts, and then they kind of update it for one of the entities in this film, and I wasn't really into that, but that's very nitpicky. That's very precise for an overview. So I still recommend it if you watched Afterlife and enjoyed it. You know how I said that there was 2 kind of experimental stories that I watched this month? The other one was Origin. This film is insane. Blew me away. If you like dramas, definitely check this one out. It's based on a book. Basically, a woman is a writer, she's looking into the origins of castes and how systems are set up all over the world and how people are discriminated against through that. It's not a documentary. It's kind of like this strange mix of someone who read this book. She was very inspired by the person's message and delivered that into the film. What I absolutely adored about this movie, it has a love story within it as well as that, but it's also the main thing that you need to know about this film and that sets it apart from any other film I've ever seen is it's delivered purely with love. And they had an intro. I went to a premiere and they had the intro by the writer-director at the start, and she said everything in this film is delivered with love. So it's not it is a very emotionally taxing story, but it's delivered in such a kind, informative way. You just feel love with this, which I wasn't expecting. I cried 4 times during this movie. It was just overwhelming, and I've never seen a story delivered with so much care and love for the audience who were watching it. So it was very special. I'm going to cry again. It was a very special story. And if you like dramas, it is a drama and it is emotionally taxing. Check it out. It's not a thriller or anything like that. After that, I watched, I don't know why I did this. I came home and I watched one of the most crazy documentaries about like a young woman whose mother is telling her the story about her grandfather who is a predator, and her trying to put together the story of what her grandfather did. Her grandfather's still alive, and approaching him about the subject. It's a documentary. It's filmed over a couple of years. It has a really interesting kind of end spin to it. Not like a twist, but they really take it in a different direction, which I wasn't expecting. I thought it was fantastic. A really sad, dark story, but really it's put together so well, and it's such an interesting piece of media. If you're into documentaries that are very disturbing, this one's good, and it has a very personal touch to it. Next, I watched Bad Dreams, which is just a fun, kooky cult horror movie. Kind of not a lot to follow. It's a pretty straightforward story and it's spoon-fed to you. This movie is about a girl who was in a cult. She wakes up from a coma in the hospital years later, and she has to try and readjust, but she is certain that someone is coming after her. It is a really bad portrayal of mental illness, but at the same time talks about psychiatry and psychology. So it's a very interesting mix of strange messaging, but the aesthetic of it is very 80s horror, and there's some really cool kills, some really funny one-liners, and I watched this with a group and we really enjoyed watching it, as you know, with friends who also enjoy horror. I don't know how fun it would have been to watch by myself, but I liked it. It was fun. I watched Silent House. This has been a film I've been meaning to rewatch for years. This has Elizabeth Olsen in it. She works with her dad and she goes to this house that she used to live in to try and fix up the house with her father. When she's there, just strange things start happening. It's all done in one take. Honestly, this movie, I think it's really well done, and I'll tell you why. Because I've never had such bad anxiety just watching it. I wanted it to be over because it was so anxiety inducing. It's kind of like watching Mother, just seeing her in the situation that she can't get out of. Basically, the walls start closing in on her and she realizes she's in a bad place. I don't want to say too much more than that. It is pretty simple once you catch on to what's happening, but it's a very dark story and I think that it's very effective. But all in all, all, the anxiety just drove me absolutely nuts. So I think it's an effective movie, but not one that I reach for. And I remember why I kind of tried to put it to the back of my mind. I feel like it's a really hard watch. And it's a very simple idea once you catch on to what's happening. There's quite a lot of other films that have done this, maybe in a better way. I watched Lisa Frankenstein. I did do a review for this, but as a Patreon exclusive. Thank you to all of my patrons, by the way. You make these videos possible, so I like giving you bonus videos every single week. Lisa Frankenstein, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I did not think I would, and I thought that it was going to be so different. I never watched the trailer because the film still isn't out here. I had to use a VPN, but it's not out here. And this is by Zelda Williams, directed by Zelda Williams. It's written by Diablo Cody. I just could not believe how different the story was to what I assumed it was looking at the poster and even at this image. The story is about this kooky girl who doesn't fit in, and she's made to live with her step family. She finds peace at a local cemetery where one night something spooky happens and it brings back a corpse to life. It's really about their relationship, but it's not like I thought. I thought it was going to be like Warm Bodies, and it's very different, and it's more about her and her growing and her weirdness. And I like how they focused on that and they let it shine. And I don't know, I felt it was really funny, but it was very edgy comedy that was almost borderline disturbing, which I think worked because that was why it was so funny and shocking, is that it is comedy to a lot of people. So I felt like there was a lot of social commentary going on there, floating on the surface of this comedy horror. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot more thought-provoking than I ever could have imagined. So Lisa Frankenstein's probably one of my favorites this year, and I did not expect that, trust me. I then watched Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. I did a review for that. Exactly what you expect. I thought it was really easy to digest, believe it or not. I was wondering how he was going to get that thing on his arm. I love Adam Wingard, but I wish he would come back to horror. So I don't know. It was very straightforward. It was fine. And then I watched Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which I did a review on. Please go check that out because you guys voted for me to go watch it. It's all your fault. And then the last film I watched that month was A Late Night with the Devil. And I did a review on that. I watched back movies at the cinemas to do reviews, and I will be doing the same this week. So keep your eyes peeled for a lot of come with me's. I loved Late Night with the Devil. If you didn't see my review, absolutely loved it. Loved it more than I thought I would. And I love the comments that I got on that video as well. A lot of people discussing the AI art, and I found it very informative, so I really recommend you go check that out. I love the stylization of this story, but I also love the themes and subject matters and the way it came together. It was really immersive for me. It felt like I was actually watching a late night TV show. If you don't know what it's about, it is about a late night, talk show where it is set on Halloween and they're trying to drum up the performances for ratings, and then things go wrong. I really felt like it was a breath of fresh air, especially after watching Godzilla and Winnie the Pooh. It felt very different to me and fun and exciting. Let's talk about TV shows. I watched Kid Nation this month, which is an older TV show, reality TV series about kids they put in middle America in the middle of a ghost town and expect them to all survive for 40 days in this place by themselves. They put them into class systems. Of course, there's a brew there, and we don't know how much production goes on behind the scenes, but they do sleep on the floor, they clean their own toilets, they make their own food, they do the dishes. They basically run this town and they try and work together as a little community. It's a very strange show, and I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but I ended up loving it. There's so many heartwarming moments, and these kids are so cute. And at the end of every single episode, the people who are the head of the town, they select one kid who's been doing exceptionally well and give them 20 grand. So it was a very strange TV show. It got canceled halfway through the second season, I believe. And my friend Stevie, she recommended it to me. So thank you so much, Stevie. I really enjoyed it and I breezed through it. I think it's from the 2000s. Highly recommend if you can find it. Speaking of reality TV shows, I also watched Traders. I've watched the most recent US one, which was a really interesting ending. And I also watched the UK season 2 and the Australian one. So I watched a bunch of Traders TV shows. If you don't know what Traders is, we did talk about it last month. It's basically a house where, kind of like The Mole, there's a couple of people in there who are killing off, aka just, outvoting other contestants, and they don't know who they are, and they have to try and guess who they are to get them out. And if they don't get them out and they survive till the end, they get the prize pool, and they do competitions to add to the prize pools. Like Survivor, it's a game of strategy and alliances, so I really enjoyed that. I'm also up to date with Jersey Shore, very interested with all of these episodes leading up to Ron's return, and absolutely love Sammy. She is the best, and I'm so glad she's back. I'm also watching Vanderpump Rules, of course, and I have very strong opinions on that. I am very perplexed by the idea that Lala, I used to love Lala, but Lala is the inner voice, or the viewer's voice, which is a lot of people are saying. Andy Cohen said that. She was the viewer's voice and the voice of reason. Totally disagree. I feel like they've completely lost perspective of real life, and Sheena is as annoying as ever. That's all I have to say about that. But I can't wait to see what happens for the rest of the show and how it ends with the finale, because I've heard that the reunion's pretty intense. I finally finished Succession season 4. We finished it. Such a good ending. Such a strange ending. It took me so long to get into it, but once I got into it, we couldn't stop. It is about a family. It's actually based on the Murdoch family, which is an Australian media empire that Rudolph Murdoch, he went over to America and became a citizen so he could own American media as well. And it's this very strange dynamic in a mega wealthy family, and them competing to try and take over the business. And I loved it. Brian Cox was so amazing in it, but everyone was. Every actor in that, it's so hard to believe that that's not who they really are. They play the role so perfectly, and it was just such a great casted show. I've never seen anything with that kind of dynamic, so I think it's really special. And I'm so glad they just did it for 4 seasons and then didn't try and extend it. So I was very happy with how it ended in a weird way. It was kind of unexpected, but also really expected, because that show has a way of really misleading you, which I like. I watched Quiet on Set, which apparently isn't finished. There's new episodes coming, but it's a documentary series you've probably heard a lot of people talk about the kids who used to work in Nickelodeon, child actors, and the awful stories they have, the traumatic stories they have from the time they worked there. I was shocked, but I'm sadly not as shocked as I should be, because I follow a lot of this before them talking about it. I follow a lot of Amanda Bynes' story. The details are horrific, and I'm glad that they finally had a platform to talk about it and things are being brought to the light. People being brave enough to speak about this helps change things for others, especially because that is a format that should be changed and something that can be if it has enough eyes and ears on it. So I'm glad that people have come forward, but I can't imagine how much that would have taken. It's a very hard watch, especially if you loved Nickelodeon as a kid, which I did, especially Amanda Bynes. So yes, I did watch it. And I watched True Detective season 4. Oh my God, with Jodie Foster. It's only 6 episodes long. It's a standalone series. So if you haven't watched any of the True Detective series before, basically you can watch them all separately. They're kind of anthologies, but this one is completely standalone, and it's set in Alaska, where this research team working in this facility disappear, and 2 policemen come together, put aside their dark history and try and find out what happened here. It is a very horror-centered story. So if you don't watch these because they're too thriller, this one is actually horror, I would say. It's got a lot of elements, and I wasn't expecting that. Definitely some very visually intense moments. So it was interesting. It was quite short and sharp, which is something. And I love the backdrop. There's something so spooky about a town that the sun never rises and everything takes place in the middle of the night which it looks like in the middle of the night. It wasn't my favorite story, but I felt like it was so short and sharp that it was really easy to breeze through. I also watched The Program, which is a Netflix miniseries, is a must watch if you're a true crime fan. It goes into extreme detail. It is also another documentary that is from the perspective, obviously, of the people involved, but made by them. So it feels very authentic and detailed. It doesn't try and gloss over anything, and it doesn't spare you from any of the information. It's about a girl who was forced, really kidnapped and taken to a program for troubled youth, and about all of the people she met there and all of the awful things they had to do and how they were raised there and how that has traumatized them for life. I would highly recommend it. It's really well done and yeah, very intense. As soon as I started it, I couldn't stop. It's 3 episodes long, but I really enjoyed the length. The first episode is kind of like an overview, and then it just gets so deep down the rabbit hole and exposes so much. It's really a short amount of time for how much information is in there. So very much worth your time if you like true crime. And then games, of course, I stream over on Twitch. I do new games all the time. In fact, this week we're doing The Quarry, which will be on my Thursday night schedule. It's always linked down below, and you can click on my Twitch and you can see my schedule. But that's Thursday nights or Friday mornings. If you're in Australia, I'm going to play The Quarry. But last month, I believe I did Poppy's Playtime last month. I had seen all of the figures from Poppy's Playtime all over Japan when I went to Japan last year, and it was really fun to finally figure out the lore and all of that behind it. It was so scary. I play with a heart rate monitor on, and I was through the roof screaming the entire time. It was insane. I also played Bramble the Mountain King. I have highlights for these if you want to see a quick playthrough on my gaming channel. That was such a stunning game. I think that's the most beautiful game I played thus far, that and Little Nightmares, but such a beautiful game and such a weird journey. I feel like the bosses in it were kind of basic, the idea behind the gameplay, but that's okay because I'm not a good player. But I just loved the whimsical nature of it, and then how messed up some of the aspects were to how beautiful some of the other stuff was. So it was a really interesting twist. I always am blown away by how disturbing video games are. I'll never get over that, and that's something that's quite new to me. So anyway, I look forward to playing The Quarry, and if you want to come join, please do. We love having new people over there. Anyway, I've taken up way too much of your time. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Spookyastronauts if you want to be eligible for winning the giveaway, which is worldwide. Don't forget to check out all of these videos I made recently, so many, and I'll see you very soon for another one. Bye, friends.